Alright, here's part 2 of the review, starting with number 8. AB has an endpoint at negative 2, 4 and 3, 5. So if point C is graphed so that B is the midpoint, then what are the coordinates of C? So we have a midpoint, an endpoint, and we're looking for our other endpoint. So remember I told you set up your XY. It's endpoint, midpoint, endpoint. Okay, so our endpoint is A, negative 2, 4. And our midpoint is going to be B, so that's 3, 5. So now I have to figure out what do I do to get from negative 2 to 3. Well, if I take my midpoint and subtract my endpoint, I get 3 minus negative 2. Midpoint minus our endpoint. Plus a positive, so that's 5. So that's a positive 5, so that means we added 5 to get from here to here. This is a plus 3, so now we're going to add 5 to our 3, and we get 8. Here, 4 to 5 is adding 1, so we're going to add another one, we get 6. So our other endpoint would be at 8, 6. Number 9 is a triangle has vertices at A is negative 3, 2, B is 1, 6, and C is negative 4, negative 1. Where would the endpoints be if the triangle was rotated 270 degrees counterclockwise? So if you had graphed it, you would have graphed the triangle and rotated it to the left 270 degrees. You just rotate your graph paper. If you decided to do it by what happens to the points, well, when you rotate 270 degrees counterclockwise, you switch X and Y, and the X changes signs. So you go from XY to Y negative X. That's your change. So A prime would be negative 3 and 2 would switch places, and the negative 3 would become positive. So it would go to 2, 3. B prime, 1 and 6 are going to change places, and the 1, since it was a positive, it is now going to become negative, so we get 6, negative 1. Then for C, negative 4 and 1 switch places. The negative 4 is negative, so it becomes positive, so we get negative 1, 4. And the last one has to do with trying to find the perimeter of a triangle. So if we drew our XY coordinate grid here, let this be our X and this be our Y. Point A would be right here. Point B would be at 1, 6. So here is point B. And then point C is at negative 4. And we would go down to negative 1. So that would be C. So this is kind of what our triangle would look like. So to find the perimeter, we need to find the distance between A and B, between B and C, and between A and C. So we're going to do the distance formula 3 times, and then to find the perimeter, we're going to add those together. So A, we're going to name that x1, y1. B is x2, y2. So for AB up here, x2 is 1 minus x1 is negative 3 squared plus y2 is 6 minus y1 is 2 squared. And when we plug that into our calculator, we plug in square root of 1 minus negative 3 squared plus 6 minus 2 squared. We get 5.66. Okay, so that's AB. Now we're going to erase these, and we're going to find from A to C. So we get A to C equals x1, y1, x2, y2. So x2 is negative 4 minus x1 is negative 3 squared plus y2 is negative 1 minus y1 is 2 squared. So when we plug that into the calculator, we get, let's see, square root of negative 4 minus negative 3 squared plus 1 minus negative 1 minus 2 squared, and we get 3.16. Okay, so now we're going to erase again. And then we're going to find BC. That's the only one we haven't done yet. So BC, we get x1, y1, x2, y2. So x2 is negative 4 minus x1 is 1 squared plus y2 is negative 1 minus y1 is 6 squared. And when we plug that into our calculator, the square root of negative 4 minus 1 squared plus negative 1 minus 6 squared, and we hit enter, we get 8.6. And my phone is ringing. So now to find the perimeter, we're going to add those up. 5.66, 3.16, and 8.6. And we get 17.42. So our perimeter is 17.42.